Hi, welcome to Off Script. I'm Zach Lewis.
And I'm Dr. Draper.
Today on the show, we are taking a look at Napoleon, Ridley Scott's new sword and sandal epic. Of course, about Mr. Bonaparte himself. I feel like if you're an adult and you are listening to or watching this show and were able to acquire the technology, you probably know who Napoleon is. I don't think we need to explain it much. We're also going to take a look at Saltburn. Emerald Fennel's new feature is out. We covered Promising Young Woman when it came back. Pretty Young Woman? It's Promising Young Woman, isn't it? I had it right the first time. I should have just kept going. We watched that back on the show a while back. I'm excited to talk about Saltburn. We're going to talk about what's going on at the box office right now and why theater owners might be a little scared about what's coming for the end of the year. Normally a very exciting time to be at the movies. And before we get to all of it, we need to talk about the news. Our first story this week, Scream VII is dead. I mean, maybe not, right? Jenna Ortega drops out of Cooked. Drops out of Scream 7. Melissa Barrera, we covered this just last week, the star of Scream 5 and 6, was recently removed from Scream 7 following some posts regarding Israel and Hamas. Jenna Ortega, the next day after we did the show, announced that she's not going to be in Scream 7. Big news, Andy. What do you know about this?
So while Melissa Barrera was fired by Spyglass Entertainment, Jenna Ortega, on the other hand, just dropped out herself. She claimed it was because of scheduling conflicts with the second season of Wednesday, but it's pretty convenient timing that the day after her co-star is fired, and they kind of announced that they're going to pivot the series around her character, that she just drops out as well, largely viewed as in solidarity with Melissa Barrera. So Scream is now going to be completely like retooled. I don't even know if they're going to bring back any of these kind of new young cast members at all, like Mason Gooding or anyone. Spyglass is having to just completely pivot. They were wanting to put out another Scream movie in probably 2025 or so, and it's just not going to happen at this point. They're having to completely retool it, start over. Who knows what it's going to do?
One of the biggest L's, I think, in recent studio memory. I mean, outside of like large losses, a la like Disney not putting out a bunch of bangers, Spyglass managed to fumble what was otherwise a really well-going series. Scream 5 and 6 both did really well. They put them out back-to-back, one after another. And in 2022, Jenna Ortega had an incredible year as an actress. She starred in Scream 5, X, and Wednesday, the Netflix show. Melissa Barrera, a little quieter, has done a couple other indies. But after Barrera got pushed out, everybody just assumed, like we said on this show, correctly predicted, that Spyglass would pivot and just have Jenna Ortega become the star. Well, not so. She's out. Andy's right. I don't know where they go. Like, you had a year-over-year moneymaker and you managed to fumble it. Incredible. I don't know what the plan is for Scream. Personally, I'd call up Nev Campbell, be like, what do you want? Like, blank check. Just please come to a Scream movie, for God's sake, you know? Or figure out a way to get, like, flashback Matthew Lillard back in these movies. Like, do something, right? Matthew Lillard just did Five Nights at Freddy's. Like, they gotta pivot, because they can't reboot again. They've done this too many times. It's like Spider-Man now. We've had, like, 3 Scream reboots.
Yeah, these movies have been huge. These reboots have grossed over $300 million on very small or on very modest budgets. They've been huge hits for Spyglass back to back, which is really impressive because you never know how these legacy properties are going to do when you reboot them. And it managed to be, like I said, both be very successful, huge hits, and who knows where they go now. And now the two, Melissa Barrera and especially Jenna Ortega, are huge stars. Jenna Ortega she's doing Beetlejuice too. She's got Wednesday. She can do whatever she wants right now. Melissa Barrera also getting better roles, so that they can move on pretty easily.
Yeah. Real bummer for Scream fans out there. Something great for Taylor Swift fans. Eras, the Eras Tour film, is going to be released on streaming in December with 3 additional songs. Now, neither of us are Swifties on the show, right? Mad respect for Taylor Swift, but neither of us particularly listened to her music. We didn't go see the movie. But I know the whole song thing is like a whole hook, right? Like catching specific versions of stuff, like people get stoked for it. So like, as far as I know, this is also going to make a ton of money, right? Just like the theatrical run.
Probably come December 13th, we'll be able to probably rent. I don't think it's going to like Netflix or anything. Be able to VOD the Eras Tour film, and it's going to have additional footage. This is a really genius move because in all her touring and her movies, like she'll withhold certain songs and she'll play some things in one place and not another, and so like it's just a draw to continue to get her fans to buy to buy her stuff and to see her, and it's really successful. I know some friends who are already, they're planning a day that they're going to get together with a group of their friends, watch it, and the Taylor Swift business marketing is just insane. It's so successful and so smart. It seems to work every time.
Yeah, it's bananas. Again, nothing but respect for Taylor Swift. Like, I don't know how they cooked this up. I don't know who thought putting out a concert film would be like the most brilliant thing ever, but it totally was. Like, she's already on a huge tour. Why not just immediately make that available at a lower price for people at home? It reminds me of like vaudeville theater, right? Like nickel cinemas way back in the day. Oh, you can't afford to go see it live? Well, slide on in here and you can get almost the real thing at half the price. And coming to VOD, like it's going to have, I think, just as much success. People will be able to clip it, share it, screen cap it, put it on TikTok, like share memes about it. Like, brilliant. Brilliant. Other artists are following suit. Beyonce has her film coming out this next week, right? We were just talking about this before the show.
Renaissance.
Yes. Jennifer Lopez announced she has a film coming soon. I don't, just to wax really quickly, I don't think there's any dude artist that can pull these kinds of numbers, right? I'm not even sure either of those artists will make as much money as Taylor Swift has made here, but like this can't last long, surely, right? Like
maybe someone like Bad Bunny, who's incredibly popular right now, but that's kind of it. I don't know what other artists. I mean, maybe a Harry Styles, but not near to this amount. Like the Taylor Swift popularity is just insane.
it's got to be Kanye. It's the only way. I don't know who else could do it. Shout out Taylor Swift. I mean, huge success. Additionally, one more note on this story. The film at theaters has crossed $250 million globally. Honestly, I know she's a huge deal in the United States, especially Texas, but this just goes to show like how narrow somebody's like field division can be. Andy, I genuinely thought this movie was going to make over $1 billion. So it's, in a way, it's humbling to see that like the rest of the world does not feel the same way people in my age bracket in Texas feel about Taylor Swift. You know what I mean? Like clearly this is mostly a domestic thing, right?
Yeah, like I said before, this made most of its money in its first week. Almost $100 million the first weekend it came out, and then it's been out for about 6 weeks since then. So it's taken an additional 5-6 weeks to earn the other 150 million. So it definitely made most of its money that first week, and then it's slowly it's taken a while, but it's still, for a concert film that was probably shot for, I think, very cheaply, just several $1 million, since the stage production's already just happening. Massive return on investment for her, and a big boon for theaters who need butts and seats.
One more note before I move off this story. Do you remember that scene in Amsterdam, Andy, when Taylor Swift, guest star, like clumsily gets pulled under a car in like one of the clunkiest edited kills? Every time I see screenshots from the Eras Tour, I think of that. I'm like, God, the last time I saw Taylor Swift in a movie theater was this horrible, like very, very small scene in Amsterdam where she's terrible, like because of just the way she's put in the movie. It's Amsterdam's a clunky movie all around. Anyway, one more story to move on to before we get to Napoleon, regarding the box office this week. Hunger Games and Napoleon have taken the week. Andy covered this last week and the week before. How many movies were coming out over the Thanksgiving week, Andy? It was like 9, 15?
Yeah, well, there were 4 releases on Thanksgiving week, but 5 days before there were 4 releases on the previous Friday. So just 8 releases in the span of 6 days. It's crazy. It's too many movies.
It's too many movies. And I'll tell you what, like I didn't know what was going to do well, but I definitely assumed Disney's Wish would do well, and it turns out it hasn't. It's underperformed with something like 31 million. And originally, like a couple months ago, that was on track to make 45. So it made two thirds of what they thought it would make, which is Not outstanding. We'll talk a little bit more about Disney in between our reviews here when we talk about the box office for the rest of the year. But I definitely didn't think Hunger Games and Napoleon were going to take the week. Andy, what was your pick? I had no idea those two movies are going to. Hunger Games 4. I had no clue that was going to do that good.
I thought that Napoleon and Wish would kind of come out on top because they're big new releases from big studios, and I figured the Hunger Games steam would all be over after the first weekend. But kind of a big upset in all ways. Like you said, the Hunger Games prequel came out top. It's made $200 million now globally. Napoleon actually did way better than projected. It's still, I mean, it's a very expensive movie, $200 million, but that's kind of chump change for Apple. So they're not worried about box office just yet. But that did a lot more popular with older audiences. And again, Disney's wish ungranted. It just didn't hit with family, family films. They had to contend with Trolls Band Together. The Trolls film that came out again 5 days before. So there again, just too many movies, and just Wish just looks really lackluster. I'd like to see it at some point just to see why it was so lackluster, but nothing in the trailer made it look enticing to me.
Man, I'm in the same boat. Christine kind of wants to see it, and like I wouldn't mind, I guess, going to see it for a date night or something. But like every Disney movie shows up on Disney Plus in like 60 days, right? Like I don't have to wait that long, and I can just watch it at home. So I don't know. I'm if we do Wish, we'll cover it in a micro review for the show for sure. I definitely want to make sure we get to that. As for the 35,000 foot view, like seems like a pretty average Thanksgiving, other than the number of releases people turned out. Napoleon did have a surprising amount of success, I think, thanks to, of course, older males, and also over in Europe it did well. And like I guess I'm not surprised that it did well in Europe, but that's a nice boon. I think that a lot of like traditional American holiday oriented features that are going to be coming out on American holiday, a la Thanksgiving, you're not expecting to kill it overseas, right? Like you're probably slanting more towards the day. But overall pretty good. If anything, I think I'm excited to talk about it. Andy, any other thoughts before we jump to Napoleon?
I think I'm ready.
All right. Well, I'm going to be taking the summary on this one, so please excuse my clumsy delivery. The movie is Ridley Scott's Napoleon. So, Napoleon is, of course, the story of Napoleon Bonaparte, set from the late 1780s to the early 1820s, I believe. Napoleon covers the rise of the man, the myth, the legend, played by Joaquin Phoenix. Napoleon is a conqueror, right, in France. He begins as a kind of a cadet. He quickly becomes a brigadier general after working through a couple of operations. After that, he continues to essentially seize promotion after promotion until he's eventually crowned Emperor of France. And then, of course, well, I don't want. We don't do spoilers on this podcast, but like any historical biopic, you understand a human man must fall. Like Napoleon is supported by the love of his life, Josephine, played by Vanessa Kirby, who's transformative in this role. It is a sword and sandal epic, a la Ridley Scott, of course, director of Gladiator, Alien, Blade Runner. Yes,
Musket and Clog.
Musket and Clog, I think, is probably the better one for him. Musket and Clog might make the YouTube thumbnail. But overall, Napoleon is a large historical biopic. It cost a lot of money to make, $200 million. And while it seems like Apple may not make their money on it, Ridley Scott's expressed interest in releasing a 4-hour cut on Apple TV Plus. And most interestingly enough, and this is my favorite fact about it so far, he shot it in 62 days, which is insane. Stanley Kubrick spent decades researching Napoleon to make a feature. Other artists have tried and failed, and Ridley Scott makes this thing in just over 2 months. I don't believe it. Andy, what do you think of Napoleon?
Overall, I enjoyed it. I think a lot of it really works. It's great to see Ridley Scott back at the helm, and I mean, he really knows how to shoot a movie, and these battle scenes are long and very well choreographed, and there's a ton going on. And I was listening to some interviews with cast and stuff, and apparently, he like shoots things live, so he'll when Joaquin Phoenix is walking through the camp, there's cannons going off as they're recording. And whereas a lot of productions, they would be like, well, just imagine that there's booms here and there, and we'll add it in post. And he really wants his actors to feel it, and he'll do real long, like 8 to 10 minute takes. And it really gets his actors into that feeling, and that comes across on screen. Like a lot of his other films, the action is top notch. The battles are brutal. They don't really explain too much of what's going on, but you got horses on this side and horses on that side, men with sabers and soldiers. You don't need too much explanation. It kind of falls short a little bit on the narrative. It focuses a lot on the relationship between Josephine and Napoleon, but it doesn't really, like, what's it trying to tell us, or where do we really want to get with these characters? We don't get a lot of insight into the man. It's not really a biopic. It's more like, come look at all the Napoleon battles that he won and or lost.
Yeah,
so it's a mix. A lot of things work, some don't.
Yeah, I think Napoleon's biggest pains are in its script, because the visuals are outstanding. The production is fantastic. I've always liked Ridley Scott just fine, but this and his last feature, The Last Duel, like, have really turned me on to his ability to choose perspective, like, in what he presents to the audience. Last Duel especially, I mean, god, there's 3 of them, right? Like, and it's very explicitly showing the same situations from 3 different perspectives. Scott, like, really can put his audience in whatever seat he wants them to be in, whether he's on Napoleon's side or whether they're against Napoleon, whether they're rooting for Josephine, his lover, or they don't like her. And this film, like, really interestingly, it seems like it takes more from, like, historical fact and draws from his letters to his family and brother, and of course to his lover and back, to just kind of present what we know of the man, rather than, like, put you on his shoulder and, like, have you go with him on his adventures. You never really get inside Napoleon's head. If anything, like, I think you find out more about him through events that transpire, rather than, like, how he feels about those events, because what you find is our Napoleon, while he is, of course, a conqueror on the battlefield and a brilliant military mind, is kind of a soft boy, and there's a lot of jokes about that from in history, political cartoons, and people know him to be a rather short man, have a Napoleon complex, right? And this movie, like, manages to do a really good job of stepping into that space. The problem is, I think sometimes it stands so at odds with the incredible battle sequences that it slows the movie down and it feels odd. And I think a lot of audiences have walked away feeling like, yeah, parts of it are really fun. Other parts are slow or weird, or I didn't get it, or they're, explicit. What do you think, Andy?
So one thing that I've learned and read and heard in some interviews was that the scenes, like the more political aristocrats talking scenes, a lot of that is not only improvised, but they didn't really rehearse a lot of it. They, of course, learned their parts. Like, I listened to an interview with Vanessa Kirby where she says, they learned their parts and their lines, and they did a lot of research separately, but they never rehearsed together until it was just the time to shoot. And then they would just shoot. And then there's a number of times where they just improvised. They had guidelines and then improvised a scene, and they would improvise for like 5 or 10 minutes. And Ridley Scott would maybe take 1 minute from it. So it kind of gives it a strange life to it, because there's a couple of things where shocking things kind of happen on screen, and you can tell the actors on screen are shocked, not just the audience. But it kind of lacks a through narrative, and usually a movie like this will use our main character like Napoleon to maybe touch on larger things or touch on larger kind of issues. Something like The Social Network isn't really about Mark Zuckerberg. It's more about a certain cult of personality, and that's what I was kind of wanting from this, but we don't ever really get it.
Yeah, I was so interested in Napoleon's lover, Josephine, played by Vanessa Kirby. Like I said, before I saw the film, I had seen people saying Joaquin Phoenix is great. Vanessa Kirby is over the top. She's tremendous. Like, she floats through the movie like an angel or a ghost, right? Like, you don't even expect her to be as good as she is here. And her role's simple, but a lot like The Last Duel. I'm reminded of, like, our scenes with, like, Jacques Legris, when we're seeing his perspective and not, like, his lover's perspective at all. Similar kind of bones here. Like, I want to see the Josephine movie as much as I want to see the Napoleon movie, and we're never getting that. And like, she wasn't the big figure in history, and that's fine. But I think Scott sets the two of these characters up to be really tremendous together, but we in the audience never see how tremendous they are because we're so busy looking at Napoleon's tremendous accomplishments. And like, that makes him being a cock or him being like a small man. So I think I can say that on the internet. I can say that on this show, right? That makes that like funny, but also like inversely feel very incongruous with like the larger events unfolding. So it's just weird, right? Like, our man is Emperor of France, but also people are making fun of him in the papers, and he doesn't seem to care, but he does. Like, that stuff I think makes for a good rewatch, kind of rewatchability, but I think makes for a confusing first stop.
Right. It never really tells us, like, apparently he was a military genius or military master, whatever. We never see that other than he just wins the battle because he wins the battle. And it's like, well, at one point he says, I just know where to put a cannon. And that's kind of all we get. We don't really get into the mind of like why he's so much better at outmaneuvering his opponents for so long, before he finally doesn't, or how he kind of navigated the political area and came to power. It's not really well explained. He just kind of does.
Yeah. I don't want to spend too much more time in vagary, like picking apart the script. I do want to mention some things that I think are really exceptional. Number one, the costuming. We got the costuming's incredible in this movie. It's probably, I think it'll win the Oscar. I don't know what else would beat it. I mean, every freaking piece of thread is like hand sewn through a thing, and it's all period from late 1700s. So all of it is specifically tailored, and like, it's like you got hundreds of extras. Scott does not cheap out on extras on camera. That was one of the things that really surprised me. If you have like a street that Napoleon is riding through on a horse, there'll be 19 people walking through frame. If you've got a battlefield, you'll copy and paste platoons and units, and CGI them all in there. Sure, that's fine. I get that. But, you'll have a platoon shot and it'll be 45 dudes and 18 guys on horses down this huge line. Maybe some of them were copy and pasted, but like, I can't believe how much money is on screen. And for $200 million, like, Apple got what they paid for. I don't think they're going to make it back. It's worth mentioning, but that's not what it's about. Just like Killers of the Flower Moon, like, they're trying to forge longer relationships with filmmakers, and I think they're doing a great job. The costuming's incredible. The music's real big. The color grading is really good. If you're an editor, the color grading in Napoleon is very bold.
It's nice to see what it's nice to see what $200 million gets you when you're not making a superhero movie. Because when you look at like The Flash or Quantumania, you see so much money going towards VFX that a lot of times don't look very good. And this is nice to see. What happens if we spend $200 million on practical effects, on having hundreds of extras, of having them all be in costume and having period accurate food, setting, costuming, language, whatever else.
Yeah.
It's incredible the kind of movies you get if you spend that $200 million differently.
Yes.
So that was really great to see. Like you said, there's great scenes where there's 8 or 9 men on horse, sabers out, dashing into battle. And I was like, this looks incredible. This looks amazing. And I haven't seen something like that on screen in quite a long time.
Yeah, like, I mean, like, just watching the trailer, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see, yeah, like any of these scenes, he'll be at the palace. There'll be 40 people in the background, like, oh my God. And every one of them is in costume. I said at the top, I don't know how Ridley Scott managed to do this so fast, because Ridley Scott's getting up there, and I love this comparison now that he's getting drawn between like Scorsese and Spielberg, who are making films like The Fabelmans and Killers of the Flower Moon, and saying like this might be one of my last. If I only had more time, I could make more movies. And meanwhile, Ridley Scott is cranking out like 3 movies a year and has no plan of stopping. And he's seemingly only getting better. I don't know what this is about. I love it. I hope the man doesn't lose a step. I don't know if I have much more to say about Napoleon. Two quick things to say about Napoleon. Number one, the runtime kind of hurts. It's a little long. It's like 2.5 hours. I'll admit it's a lot. But it feels
It's
big and
different.
grand, and it earns it, I think.
It's definitely poised for those streaming services where you can sit down and watch a 4-hour cut over several days. Same thing
Yes.
with Killers of the Flower Moon. They don't care about the length because they know it's great for their streaming service.
Yeah. Number two, surprisingly gory. It is an R-rated feature. I wouldn't recommend watching with parents if possible, for some of the more intimate scenes. But yeah, I was. I mean, it opens with a beheading, which I think is smart and sets the tone for what's to come. The idea of a leader, a ruler who will fall, right, in probably graphic fashion. That's good stuff. Real smart, real sharp. Um, Two questions for you, Andy, before we wrap. Three questions for you, I think. Number one, any other thoughts?
No. Continue.
Number two, interestingly, Zack Snyder had the 4-hour cut of Justice League came out, and we watched it. Will you be watching the 4-hour cut of Napoleon?
No. Like it was a struggle to get through the 2 hours and 40 minutes that it is. I'm not adding in another hour and what. I don't know what
I
more I'm gonna get out of it.
I think I would watch it, and I'm curious if this will influence our recommendations. But Andy, would you recommend Napoleon?
I would. Uh, Definitely big content warning. It is a war film. There's lots of graphic battle scenes of 1800s level warfare. Like I said, it starts with a very graphic beheading, so you kind of know what you're getting into from the beginning. But outside of that, there are phenomenal battle scenes, and it's great to see all the money on screen in terms of extras. And I mean, they use VFX as well. The story, the plot kind of is lacking narratively. It's not as interesting as it could be. We don't really have a deep dive into our character, which is kind of difficult with a historical figure that's so divisive and so biasedly written about. But overall, I'd recommend.
I would recommend it too. I think it's might be my favorite recent Scott film, and I like Last Duel a lot. But man, this played great. I saw it on a real big screen. I went and saw it with my dad over Thanksgiving. Had a great time. I'm looking. I would like to watch that 4-hour cut. Actually, I think I'm in the opposite camp. I think I want to go a little deeper. I want to see what didn't get in there. Like I think watching something like Killers of the Flower Moon, like I've really starting to come around on the idea that like length is not necessarily something to be opposed to, right? Like in the hands of the right filmmaker, like you won't even notice. And I think Ridley Scott's got something really good here. I do think it's going to be a little divisive because it's kind of feels like it's got its feet in two camps, but like I like it. I like Napoleon, and I'm looking forward to what Scott's doing next. And I if I do watch that 4-hour cut, I'll definitely report back on the show. Woo! All right, my summary movie's done. Sick. Andy's taking Saltburn, but before we get to that, we need to talk about one other thing. Andy, what do we call this segment?
It's time for the death of cinema. So this is parentheses box office doom is what we're talking about.
Doom.
Two big stories that came out this week. Disney is having a dismal year at the box office. The year of our Lord 2023 has not been good. Disney has not made a $1 billion film this year. In contrast, in 2019 they had 7. And this is the first year since 2014 that they didn't have a $1 billion feature. And not only have they not had a $1 billion feature, they've missed hugely on so many movies. Ant-Man 3, Quantumania, recently The Marvels, Wish as well. Elemental actually ended up doing okay. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny was a big flop. So most of their movies this year have been just disasters, and it's a stark contrast to when they were like box office gods and invincible at the box office, and now the winds are changing for sure. Zach, what are your thoughts?
I think Disney has had this really clumsy long-term strategy, and it's funny because Disney is not typically known to be a company with a clumsy long-term strategy. Long-term strategy is kind of their game. This Disney has always treated things like home media with a 10-foot pole. Way back in the day, they didn't want to release VHS tapes, and then when they did, they charged a bunch and put them in fancy clamshells, and they had the Disney Vault, and they wanted to make sure that their intellectual property, their IP, was always held near and dear, and that they could distribute it whenever they needed, like cards at a poker table for like profit or growth, or they could lean on those properties and grow them as necessary. But through the 2010s, Disney has pivoted, and they have just been firing every cannon in the arsenal, just making banger after banger after banger. They started up their line of live action remakes, right, which have been divisive, but functionally have been cannibalizing their own catalog to just start putting out 3 or 4 of these a year. And the ones that don't really work, they put them on Disney Plus, which is a whole new platform they came out with to put all of their content, just make it all available as soon as possible. And to drive up subs to Disney Plus, they said every movie we put in theaters is going to go to Disney Plus in 90 days. So if you miss it in theaters, wait 3 months and it'll be available at home. Like, all of these decisions have made them money very quickly, but every one hasn't come with the safety of a long-term gain. And the idea has been, like the stupid new Star Wars trilogy, that we'll come up with the very beginning of an idea, and then we want to actually plot out like a strat to long term to make this work. And this was clever for Bob Iger, because he left the company in 2019, and Bob Chapek slid in and immediately starts getting hammered with all of these L's, because Iger did not actually, I think, really build like a plan. And now Iger's back, and it feels like the magic's gone, and Wish comes out, and it's not nearly the banger that what would a Disney princess movie should be. It's bad news, Andy. Like, it's bad news for Disney. It sounds like they're pivoting, kinda. What do you think?
It's taken some time. I'm going to blame Disney Plus. They came out
Disney
with their
Plus is a big
streaming
part of it.
service.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, they're in the content creation business, and that is an expensive one to be with. And that's just, they kind of started diluting the brand with all these Marvel shows, and they just started kind of greenlighting all this real expensive stuff. And that's really, I think, cut into their superhero stuff. And again, it's just like, what was Bob Chapek greenlighting? Because all the stuff that's coming out now, like Marvel's Ant-Man 3, Wish, were all things greenlit several years ago when Bob Chapek was in charge. And it's been quantity over quality, it seemed to be, when he took over. And like you said, Disney is pivoting to focus back on quality and on characters, and maybe people a little bit more thoroughly, and less on just cranking out shows and movies because they have a streaming service to support now.
Of course. And Disney Plus, like you said, is a tremendous part of it. Like, not only in training audiences that media will be available there shortly after theatrical release, but in just general startup costs. Again, it was take a bite of the apple today. Every other studio is starting up a streaming service. We should start one too. And for what it's worth, Disney Plus quickly rose the ranks and is one of the most popular. And I think they are totally making paper, and that's fine. But they are very quickly realizing, like everybody else, that they're functionally operating at a loss. And this is with Disney pulling their funny financials that they've always done with like every release, to like lay part of the cost in one quarter and part of the cost in another. So like, even with baller House of Mouse accounting, they still cannot figure out a way to make money. You're right. They're pivoting. Just today, there was a statement that was like, we're really looking forward to making quality, not quantity, in 2024. And it's like, that's a great idea. Also, you guys are already making Mufasa, right? The Lion King prequel by Barry Jenkins. Yeah. And you're working on Toy Story 5, and Frozen 3 is in the works. And last week, Bob Iger was talking about Frozen 4. Like, who's running this company? And I think maybe like Marvel, that can be a solution, right? Maybe a change in leadership is due, like not only in Iger, but maybe in Kevin Feige over in Marvel. Like, maybe we start to, play around with the house style a little bit. Maybe we shake it up, maybe that would be good.
They got to do something. They got to make changes, because it's not the same world as it was pre-pandemic. In 2019, there were no competing streaming services. Like, you didn't have Disney Plus, you didn't have HBO Max. You didn't have half the ones that, and you didn't have those expenses. And also, audiences were still really hungry for the Marvel machine, and they were going to everything Marvel made. no matter the quality. And luckily back then the quality was good, but now, like we've said, the Marvels is a good movie that people aren't going to see because they're tired of, because they had to sit through 5 mediocre superhero movies. And so the pivot back to quality and focusing on that will help. There's supposed to be continuing Star Wars with Daisy Ridley. We'll see if that happens, because those projects get constantly announced and shelved. We'll see if any of that materializes. They got Avatar 3 to look forward to in 2025. It's just tough because it's like, how do you right the ship when decisions have to be made years in advance? It's really tough.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, I can't wait to see if Disney's plan is to pivot to quality going forward. And they already spent $250 million on the likes of Indy 5 and the Marvels. I can't wait to see what they're willing to greenlight for a budget on quality over quantity. You know what I mean? Like, how much? You get 350 million, 400? Yeah, budget's got to go down. I think you got to be smarter. Like, there's a lot of times on this show we'll cover a film that is not that expensive. I mean, in the big scheme of things, obviously, these are still hundreds of millions of dollars we're talking about. But, like, we'll see something that's really particularly special. And, like, these movies don't have to cost that much, you know? Like, Disney just has this...
Hunger Games.
Yeah, less than 100 million, right? Like... And that movie looks huge and inventive, and the world looks really immersive. Like, I was asking you about it on the show. But Disney just has this, like, sickness, like, where everything they make costs too much because they don't put in the work and they don't plan ahead, and they're just... It's like they're trying to catch up with their own legacy or something. And it's like, you guys need to get out of your own way and remember, like, what put this studio on the map. I think it's good original work. I mean, look at Guardians 3, right? Having as much success as it did this year. That was a surprise hit for Disney, and even I was skeptical about that one. And now Warner Brothers has James Gunn, and he's working on Aquaman 2 for the holiday, which I think also might underperform this year, right? I mean, I think that's the kind of expectation. I don't know what's going to happen to this movie.
So theaters are a little bit nervous because usually there's a big holiday tent pole that they can just put all their chips on. Things, previous installments include Spider-Man No Way Home, not Top Gun, that came out in the summer, Avatar 2 last year. You know, there's usually a movie where they can just say everyone will go see this, and then there'll be some others that people might see. And this year we don't really have that. The big Christmas releases are, again, Aquaman 2, The Color Purple, which is a film musical reimagining of that property. Wonka the week before, but that's not exactly on Christmas Day. And then other little things like Ferrari and The Iron Claw, like independent movies. So you got things that people will see, and that might spread the wealth a little, but you don't have a big, huge $1 billion promising film that everyone's just going to go see. I'm excited about Aquaman 2, but I don't think general audiences are.
Yeah, I definitely didn't see the first one, but I think it's worth mentioning Aquaman 2. I think will do great overseas. I think that's going to be like the overseas runaway. That's going to be the big exciting release that week. Also, Wonka, Color Purple, Mean Girls remake. Musicals are back, baby. Didn't you know? Weren't you aware? Even though Mean Girls isn't coming out this holiday. You're right. Like, I think this holiday is looking a little trim. Disney originally had planned to have Avatar and or Star Wars out in alternating years. We covered that on the show way back when they announced that. And of course that didn't happen because they can't figure out how to make a Star Wars movie anymore. And believe it or not, I think people are going to be stoked for Avatar 3, which is bananas. Because a year ago, I would have said, a year ago, I would have been watching Avatar 2. But a couple years ago, I would have said, nobody's going to be stoked for Avatar 3. It's probably not even going to happen. One thing's for sure, like, I think we've about burnt the fuel in the 2023 tank. It seems like pretty much everything cool has mostly come out. I mean, obviously, I'm still looking forward to some stuff, but yeah, like, I don't think we're gonna have any Barbenheimers like for the rest of the year. It's pretty much done.
Yeah, the biggest movies that have come out.
That's right. So get your top 10 list together. All right, start thinking about it. Hop on Letterboxd and start putting it together. See what your favorites are. I know I got to get mine together. We do the big show at the end of the year, of course. We cover our favorite top 10s, and if you want more of that, subscribe to Off Script, and we'll send it to you when we make it. But any other thoughts on this before we move on to Saltburn, Andy? Any thoughts on the state of the industry?
I mean, it's going to be. There's a lot of December releases, but it's going to be a little shaky over Christmas. We'll see what kind of wins the weekend. It could be the kind of thing where maybe all the movies do well, but they could all just kind of bomb because audiences have a lot of at home options. So we'll see what they actually come out for.
It's true. It was a funny thing. I think I told you this. Going to see Napoleon with my dad, he said, God, I haven't been to a movie theater in a long time. And I thought, well, Dad, we went and saw Indiana Jones 5 this summer. You saw that with me. You seen anything since? He kind of thought it was like, nope, that was it. I was like, you haven't gone to see anything? He was like, Zach, look how much content I have in my house on my television. He's like, what am I going to go watch? I was like, yeah, I think a lot of Americans feel that way, but obviously he's the bellwether for everything. Love you, Dad. We should move on to our final review of the episode. Really excited to talk about this one. Andy's taking the summary. Please, Andy, take it away.
Saltburn. So this is the sophomore follow-up from Emerald Fennel, who previously did Promising Young Woman, which we reviewed back in 2020. That movie was kind of mixed, very divisive. I remember saying that, well, we thought that Emerald Fennel had a ton of promise as a director, and it would be interesting to what her future films would be like. Here we are with Saltburn, which stars Barry Keoghan as Oliver, who is a new student at Oxford, and this is taking place back in the fall of 2006, 2007. And Barry, or Oliver rather, is an outsider. He is a working class person who's had to work very hard to get into Oxford. He's a scholarship boy, as they say. He's not cool. He doesn't really have any friends here, and he's in a world he doesn't really know or recognize, where there's a bunch of absurdly wealthy elitist students. His first class has literally 2 students in it, and it's them just talking with the professor, and the professor knows the other student. He's like, oh, I went here with your mother, and they're very chummy. And so he's in a world he doesn't know, but would love nothing more than to be part of it. He eventually makes friends with Jacob Elordi's Felix, who's one of the wealthy, vapid characters in the movie. They have a great school year, and at the end of the school year, he invites him to come to Saltburn, his family estate and home, for the summer. When he goes out there, he then tries to become one of these elite people. He tries to play the games that they play. He wants desperately to become an insider. There's some other great performances, of course. Rosamund Pike, Richard E. Grant are in this. Archie Madukwe, who we saw in the Gran Turismo movie, is great, playing a really good part, because he was just kind of a stock character in the Gran Turismo movie. So it's nice to see him in here. So that's our setup. Zach, what do you think?
Saltburn is really fantastic vibes, and it crucially lacks in substance, but only in like the second half. I got halfway through Saltburn and was thinking this is a top 10 film of the year. This movie's awesome. It looks so great. God, if you've seen the trailer, if you're watching live, the trailer looks incredible. Like, the music seems good. You have a great cast. Emerald Fennel's an exciting new director, and while we didn't love Promising Young Woman, I felt like Saltburn is going to be something really exciting and really different. But then, like, surprisingly, much like Promising Young Woman, I find Saltburn's like faults come in its script. Emerald Fennel wrote and directed both films. Saltburn begins to take some turns in its later parts that don't feel natural, like natural extensions of what we see in the open and what we see in the trailer. And I think it ends up being surprisingly misleading, and I was really bummed. I think it might be honorable mention material this time around for me. I'm still thinking about it. I love the look, I love the feel of this movie, but boy, its characters just do some odd things, and I think that's really strange, and I'm still trying to piece together why and what that means. Before we started recording, Andy and I were talking a little bit about it, because we haven't actually talked about it yet. This will be our first real conversation, so thanks for listening in. I I don't get what Emerald Fennel is trying to say sometimes, you know. And when I watched Promising Young Woman, I thought it's because I'm just a dumb man. I'm one of these guys that she is pointing at in that film, and I need to not be that and grow and change and not be that dude. But when I watch Saltburn, I just end up a little perplexed. And I want to talk about that without talking about spoilers, because that's not what we do here. Andy, what did you think of Saltburn?
I loved the look of it. The vibes of Saltburn were great. I was so excited when this movie started. It has a great intro opening scene, and the first act is so good. And usually that's my biggest complaint, is even a lot of times really good movies or exciting movies will have a lot of kind of a boring first act where they're doing all the setup and table setting, and then it really gets going. And this is kind of the opposite, where we have a really strong start. Basically their year at school is the first act, and we see Oliver slowly break into this kind of elite kids club and begin to just kind of come out of his shell, blow off class, party, experiment with substances and girls and boys. And we see a lot of interesting character things. And then we set the table for Saltburn. And then it doesn't really go anywhere. It reminded me of much better boot movies about the same topic. A lot of people have been comparing it to The Talented Mr. Ripley from 1999, which is about someone kind of assuming someone else's identity in order to break into an elite circle. And also it reminded me of The Little Stranger, which we reviewed on the show with Domhnall Gleeson, about a doctor in England who's trying to also break into the very elite posh society. And that movie is very much about self-acceptance, and inevitably he doesn't in that movie, and it's about something. And in this, we don't really get that. Our characters are kind of the same from beginning to end. They don't change. They don't, there's not new revelations about them. When a lot of the surprises are all just revealed by the end, it's just kind of eye rolling and not surprising at all. But the filmmaking itself is incredible. There's these great scenes at Saltburn, which is this very gothic like manner. There's a big party scene halfway through. Emerald Fennel has such an incredible eye behind the camera, but the writing is just lacking. And I think maybe she just needs to work with a different writer and not her own scripts.
Yeah, I know this film was shot by Linus Sandgren, who's a cinematographer for show favorite Babylon. Love that movie. Also shot No Time to Die with Sam Mendes. Like, my man knows how to shoot a movie. And like, one thing's for sure, like, I think Emerald Fennel has dialed in her directing, and especially like her ability to collaborate in this sophomore feature. But her writing is not. It's not bad. Okay, I don't want to say it's bad. You know what this movie reminded me of? It's funny you say it reminded me of Talented Mr. Ripley. I definitely got the vibe. It also reminded me of Alex Garland's Men. Because if you saw Men, and we covered on the show, Men's, like, the first half of Men is like going in a good direction, and I like the pace. And then the second half is like, whoa, like what is happening? Like, I did not think this was the message that I was kind of in tune for. And the trailer for Saltburn and also Emerald Fennel's interviews around the film, I think, tragically have hurt this, at least for me. Maybe I've been following it too closely, but the movie really makes it look like it is a film about obsession. And in that way, it's a film about obsession with Barry Keoghan's character, Oliver Quick, with Jacob Elordi's character, Felix. It looks like Jacob Elordi is the center of attention, the crown jewel. Somebody said that to Emerald Fennel in an interview that you just made a movie about how, like, Jacob Elordi being unbelievably hot. And she was like, yep, absolutely. And it really seems that way. And in the first act, you get these really great montages of the two of them getting to know each other and spending time and getting a pint. And like, all of that feels so genuine and good. And I was reminded of like how I felt watching Bros, when Bros was like this big cinematic gay romance, but it feels a little phony and a little removed because it's like a rom-com. But Saltburn feels so honest and real and intimate and thoughtful and grand and gothic. And then once we actually get to our house, it turns out that Felix is not necessarily the object of desire. And you've been rubed in the first act, and it's like, what? Hold on. And I think that is a bit of a bummer. And it's not that I shouldn't have expected it to be that. I think if anything, it makes it better for rewatch. But I feel like she does such a good job of setting up something that the movie isn't going to be, that when it finally arrives at what the movie is, you're disjointed and you're not in the seat for it, because you're thinking, well, hold on, where was this going? What was going to happen with that plot thread? And it makes for an interesting feature. I mean, the tagline of the film, we're all about to lose our minds. The poster looks like this like astral, kind of trippy LSD almost kind of thing. But I don't know if the movie ever gets there really. And it's a shame, because I do like it, but it's like it's trying to be something it's not, I think.
Yeah, I think one of the strong parts of this are its characters. When we finally get to Saltburn, we're introduced to kind of the wider cast. Like we said, Oliver is desperate to be wealthy, be accepted into this elitist circle. But when he arrives at Saltburn, there's so much he clearly doesn't know. So there's so many like traditions and so many just culture of the very wealthy that he doesn't know, and he's constantly stepping on his own toes or other people's toes. There's the butler that's here just looks down on him in disdain, like constantly. It's really funny, but he's in this world with other really interesting characters. Again, Jacob Elordi is kind of this aloof, incredibly attractive, but also kind of vapid, but more caring character seemingly than most other people. We have Archie Madukwe plays a character named Farley, who's kind of the antagonist of the film. He knows what Oliver is all about, and he sometimes can use him. A lot of times is just very much sabotages him, and as well as other people. We have the parents played by Rosamund Pike and Richard E. Grant, who are just terrible rich people. It's great. They talk about someone dying, and Rosamund Pike says, "Oh, well, she would always die just to get people's attention." And again, he's trying to navigate these kind of absurd people in this absurd place. But I think that was one of the more interesting parts of it, are the kind of dynamics of the different characters. It's almost kind of like the royal family, where everyone has different priorities, and sometimes they're working together, sometimes they're not. There's alliances and non-alliances, and all with this fantastic Gothic backdrop of this English estate. So it's like, man, there's some of this movie that just really, really works, and it's a shame that overall it kind of doesn't.
You're right. The performances are really tremendous. Barry Keoghan is fantastic to follow. I'm so used to him being just kind of like a side character. Like he doesn't often get the protagonist role, so it's nice to see him up front and center. And he manages to have that, like, he's got that deep eye thing. Like where you could look him in the eyes and be like, I have no idea what this person is thinking, right? Like mystique almost. It makes for a unique character. And Oliver Quick, Jacob Elordi is tremendous as Felix. He is the most likable, charismatic, interesting person in the room. Like, it is immediately apparent why anybody at this school would want to be friends with Felix, would want to talk to him, would just want him to look at them for 10 seconds. Like his light is warm and bright, and I can tell it's immediately obvious that Oliver wants to be in that light. Archie Madekwe, he's really good in this movie. I liked him more in this than I liked him in Gran Turismo, and he's the lead in Gran Turismo. And tragically, in Gran Turismo, he gets third billing behind Orlando Bloom and David Harbour, and he's the lead in the movie. And in this, he gets
Orlando
last
Bland.
Billing. Yeah. What was it? Orlando Loom? Was that the joke? Yeah. But I got to reset. But in this movie, like, he's really good, even as this side character Farley, who's this bit of an antagonist and is constantly looking down at Oliver for not being from wealth like he is and everybody else is. Rosamund Pike's having a great time. Richard E. Grant's real goofy. Like, I think the cast is great, and yeah, our setting is so tremendous. I had read on Twitter that Emerald Fennel was able to acquire this estate in the UK where the entire film was shot because her parents come from wealth and they had some sweet connection, and it's like their family friend or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know about any of that. All that's unconfirmed. But I did want to state that this is all shot on location, and it looks tremendous. Saltburn is not a real estate. I don't actually have the name of the real house, but boy, like it's such a treat to spend time in, especially like just from our open, like when we're introduced to Saltburn, and as we like move through the house in this very quick off the cuff tour with Jacob Elordi's characters, his music kind of swells in, and Oliver just gets drawn in by like the scale of the place, and somebody. It's a surprisingly funny film, a la Promising Young Woman. Some great jokes, good tension even. Somebody will say, "Oh, I'll meet you in the library." It's like the library. Where's that? Or like, "Oh, you can find that servant in the kitchen." And they're like, "Where's the kitchen again?" Like it's just such a big estate for like 5 people to spend time in that it ends up feeling like old and stately and rich, while also having a character like Felix be so contemporary and down to earth and almost like hipster liberal, right? Makes for a good back and forth, and creates an interesting landscape for Oliver to kind of find himself in Saltburn, I think.
I wanted to mention a couple of last things. First of all, Carey Mulligan makes a brief appearance in the movie. Her character is credited as Poor Dear Pamela, which is hilarious, I think. I really enjoyed the score to this. It's a mix of some classical music, but also it's got some synth things going on. I want to listen to it again. Might be adding it to my very long film soundtrack playlist, which I have not added to very much this year at all. But I think that, again, the vibes of the film are immaculate. Like that part is working. Again, it's just kind of our narrative plot. Like, where do we go? Where does our character end up across this? Also, I've seen this interesting comparison to vampires, that everyone in the film is a vampire in one way or another, and there's a lot of kind of subtle and not so subtle vampire imagery throughout it. So that's kind of an interesting thing you might think about if you see it.
I'm thinking about it right now. Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. I can kind of see. Yeah. Yeah. That comes together. All right. Any other? Yeah. The music's great. Again, it's such a good looking movie. Like I like. Listen, every artist should work towards being the best version of themselves that they want to be. I think Emerald Fennel's a fine writer. Honestly, though, she dialed in the directing so good here. I almost want to see her do a feature she didn't write at this point. Like I'd love to see her take a swing at an independent script, or maybe pick up a script from another prolific screenwriter and see what comes out. Like Saltburn's really good. I just think it tragically doesn't stick the landing in the third act. It's got such a great launch in Act 1. Act 2 gets rocky. Act 3 starts to fall right off the side, and it's like, oh no, like, oh bummer, like I really do think it's a cool flick. I'll probably rewatch, but we should get to recommendations. Andy, any other thoughts for recommendations?
I think I'm ready.
Andy, would you recommend Saltburn?
I would only recommend it to people who are like, have heard about it and you're excited to see it, because I know it's had a lot of buzz. It's got some, is it going to be nominated for Oscars? So if you're interested in it and you're a fan of her previous movie, I would recommend it. But probably for the average person, I would say probably save it for streaming, because it does have some crazy scenes. It's definitely bold cinema. But I think definitely for the fans of like A24 films and independent cinema.
Yep, same boat. Bold cinema fans, you're going to like Saltburn, I think, or you won't like it, but whatever. You'll come out of the other side of it and feel like, you know what, I saw something I can't see anywhere else. And that's ultimately what Saltburn is. It's an escape to a place that none of us can go. And I think that's what makes it so exciting for our lead, right, Oliver Quick. Unfortunately, I think it also starts to overstay its welcome, not unlike maybe our protagonist. I think Saltburn's good, though. Like I said, I don't know if it's top 10 of the year material, but like I'm going to be thinking about this movie for a little while, I think. And if I do want to revisit Emerald Fennel's work at some point, I would watch this over Promising Young Woman in a New York Minute. And I like Promising Young Woman fine, but Saltburn is special. Just, it's not quite as shiny as I think a lot of us maybe might have thought it would be. And that's our show for the week. Good Lord, episode 234 of Off Script. Another one down, Andy. We're coming up on 250. What are we watching next week?
So next week, or this Friday, is December 1st. New month is rolling over. We're going to be taking a look at Godzilla -1, which is the latest film in the Godzilla franchise. This takes place post World War II, which is kind of what Godzilla has always recommended. It's a big action effects heavy film. Other releases. Oh, the other thing we're watching is May December, which is going to be out on Netflix, and this is the drama starring Natalie Portman and Juliana. I can't remember her name now. Anyways, it's
God,
a big.
You're talking about. I can't either. Hold on, I'll figure it out.
Julianne Moore. There we go.
That's the one. Julianne Moore.
Julianne
yes,
Moore.
Of course. Love her. She's great.
This is a big drama awards contender film. Natalie Portman plays an actress who is doing research to play the character that Julianne Moore is, and who was involved in like a criminal scandal earlier in her life, and so she's going to do research and kind of learn about that. It's supposed to be a very dramatic thing. That's going to be December 1st, as well as Beyonce's Renaissance concert. We're not watching that, but that is going to be also coming out on Friday. And some upcoming December releases to look forward to. Poor Things opening December 8th, along with The Boy and the Heron by new Studio Ghibli film. Eileen, the psychodrama starring Thomas and Mackenzie and Anne Hathaway. And then, of course, on December 15th, we'll be taking a look at Wonka. So a lot of really great releases coming up for next week, Godzilla -1 and May, December.
I think the December 8th show, we might have to, whatever that Tuesday after, December 12th or 13th, we might have to do 3, man. I maybe we can skip Eileen, but I'm definitely watching Boy and the Heron, and I really want to see Poor Things. I think that movie is going to be, it's got like a 96 on Rotten or something. It's insane. So we'll see. Won't make $1 billion. That's not how it works, but excited to see it anyway. If you like, I gotta plug the show. This is the part where I plug the show. If you liked Off Script today, episode 234 or 233 last week, if you liked our Saltburn review, or maybe disagreed with our Napoleon review, or agreed, the best way you can correspond with us is you can email us at mail@offscriptfilmreview.com and share your thoughts on the show. You can comment or DM, whatever, on the usual social media sites. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram. You can also follow us on those platforms. That's a sneaky something to get updates about the show. And of course, if you're watching the show on YouTube, where we have a lot of really great things going on, please go check out the YouTube channel. Shameless plug for the YouTube channel. Subscribe over there if you can swing it. We're publishing individual reviews. We're growing fast. Things are going, not that fast, but things are going on over on YouTube. And of course, the audio version of the show is available on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartMedia, all the usual podcast places where you can like and subscribe and rate and review with 5 stars, and then whatever you want in the comments, but hopefully nice things, because that's what we try to go for here on Off Script. You can check out our website, offscriptfilmreview.com, for more from the show, interviews, exciting things we're doing, and of course you can follow us at Off Script Film Review for whatever your film needs are. Movies are expensive. Podcasts are cheap. And Andy and I have been doing this long enough to tell you confidently that A, we're usually right about things, and B, we can see stuff before it happens. It's like telling the future. I'm telling you, this Jenna Ortega thing for Scream VII, we were talking about it last week, a day before it happened. We were like, no, that's not, they're just going to put the whole thing on her shoulders. And here we are. Think of what you'd know had you listened to Off Script. Think of all the things you could accomplish if you were listening to Andy and I every single week. And you can do that because we'll be back next week with Godzilla -1 in May, December. So if you want to hear that show, subscribe where you can. I should wrap it up. This has been way too long. From all of us at Off Script, the home of bold cinema, I'm Zach Lewis.
And I'm Dr. Draper.
Thanks for watching.